following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Our focus continues to be on the escalating Israel-Hamas conflict. The Israel-Hamas war has now entered its 42nd day and intense fighting continues. The United Nations has called on Israel to grant it access to Gaza for an investigation into the claims and counterclaims that are being made about Shifa, Gaza Strip's largest hospital. The agency has said the situation needs an independent international investigation because we have different narratives. Israel says Hamas is using the hospital for military purposes and runs a command and control center from the tunnels underneath the medical facility. The claim has been denied by Hamas and the hospital officials. Since it launched an operation at Shifa 3 days ago, Israel says it has found the bodies of 2 hostages near the hospital, those of a 65-year-old woman who was a mother of 5 and a young Israeli soldier. Israel also says it has found military equipment and released footage of a tunnel shaft discovered in the close vicinity of Shifa. Again, Hamas denies this and claims that it is the Israeli Defense Forces which planted these weapons at the hospital. Significantly, Israel has now dropped leaflets across parts of southern Gaza warning civilians to evacuate and head towards known shelters. A clear indication, many say, that Israel could soon expand its ground operation against Hamas from northern to southern Gaza. Remember, for weeks now, Israel was asking Gazans to evacuate the north and move to the south, claiming that the southern region would be safe for them amidst the relentless airstrikes coupled with the ground invasion. The question many are asking is, if they have to evacuate the south as well, then where do Gazans go? Meanwhile, Palestinians say the fighting around Shifa hospital, which is now at the heart of the conflict, is evidence of Israel's complete disregard for civilian life in Gaza. Israel insists that the hospital doubles up as a Hamas command center and is yet another example of how the terror organization uses civilians as human shields. In a presentation to the media, Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari claimed that Hamas is launching rocket attacks and running operations from bunkers underneath the hospital building, which are linked to the network of tunnels that Hamas has dug underneath Gaza City. The White House has backed Israel's claim, saying Hamas is storing weapons and operating a command center from Shifa. They have cited US intelligence. The allegations have been vehemently denied by Hamas and the hospital authorities. The World Health Organization chief has said Israel's military incursion into Shifa is completely unacceptable and that hospitals should not be battlegrounds. Israel says it is still working to expose Hamas's tunnel infrastructure and will provide further evidence in the days to come. Meanwhile, the 2 telecom companies in Gaza have said all energy sources in the region have run out and therefore all their services in this part are down. Israel refuses to provide fuel to Gaza, saying Hamas could use it for military purposes. With communications out and in the absence of fuel, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has said it is impossible to coordinate distribution of humanitarian aid or even movement of trucks. They say if the fuel does not come in, people will start to die because of the lack of fuel. We don't know exactly from when, but it will be sooner rather than later. According to the Gazan health authorities, at least 11,500 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli offensive. At least 4,600 of them were children and more than 3,100 were women, according to them. In an interview to CBS News in the US, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said, and I quote, "We'll try to finish the job with minimal civilian casualties." That's what we're trying to do, minimal civilian casualties. But unfortunately, we're not successful. Israel launched an all-out attack on Hamas in Gaza following the 7th October massacre, when rampaging Hamas terrorists brutally killed at least 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped almost 250 people and are currently holding them hostage in Gaza. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called on Israel to take urgent action to stop the violence by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank.
The army forces found underground shaft inside Al-Shifa hospital. The engineering forces destroyed the infrastructure. Also, we found in the hospital Hamas vehicle that was ready to be part of the October 7th attack, but did not go on the road, and inside it, huge amount of arms.
First of all, we are not targeting hospitals. Hamas has placed command and control centers under the hospitals. And from there, they are shooting and killing our citizens. So we have the right to defend ourselves. So they have the right to go into everywhere they have missiles. They have missiles in living rooms. They have terror machines in all over the civilian premises. So what we do, we alert everybody in advance according to the rules of international humanitarian law. And we send millions of leaflets and millions of phone calls we are doing. And we're sending millions of text messages. And we are telling the people in the war zone, please leave your premise so that we can go in and take all this infrastructure from your home. Some of them, in my mind, were accomplices, but some not. I agree. There are many civilians in Gaza who are innocent and not involved. But because this place was taken over, we have to remove that. In the hospitals, what we are doing is, God forbid, we are making sure that none of the patients, the doctors or the crew or the operations are even stopped. On the contrary, we brought in to the Shifa hospital a lot of equipment and food and fuel and whatever is necessary to operate the hospital. But underneath, in the cellar, in the basement, there is a war machine with missiles, with weapons, with an entire command and control. From there, they sent this barbaric terrorists to go into Israel. From there, they brought the hijacked and abducted civilians from Israel into those premises. So that's what we do.
भारत ने 7 अक्टूबर को इजराइल में हुए जघन्य आतंकी हमले की निंदा की है। हमने रिस्ट्रेंट के साथ ही डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी पर भी जोर दिया है। इजराइल और हमास के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में सिविलियंस की मौत की हम कठोर निंदा करते हैं। राष्ट्रपति महमूद अब्बास जी से बात कर हमने फिलिस्तीन के लोगों के लिए मानवीय सहायता भी भेजी है।
Active conversations with the government of Israel about ensuring that civilians can be safe from harm. We obviously saw the step that they took with respect to Khan Yunis. They originally told people to move from the north to the south. We have been in conversation with them to impress upon them that as they continue to look at expanded military operations or ground operations in other ways, in other parts of Gaza, they need to ensure that they're safe, that there are humanitarian corridors for civilians. There's protection for civilians. There are human pauses so civilians can get themselves out of harm's way, and that we can get humanitarian assistance into them, and that they're ultimately places that they can be safe from harm. That is an active, ongoing conversation between our government and the government of Israel. So we are aware of reports that there are American citizens in the West Bank who are unable to transit through Israel as they are allowed to do under the requirements of the visa waiver program. We have expressed concerns about that to the government of Israel. I won't get into full details of our private diplomatic conversations, but we expect Israel to address those concerns. We expect them to be in full compliance with the visa waiver program, and there are remedial measures that are available to us if they are not.
All right, let's go straight across to our guest tonight. Joining me on Global Lens is Limor Bletter, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Consulate General of Israel in South India. She joins us live from Bengaluru. We also have with us Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, former Indian diplomat, and Arjun Hardas, India representative of the American Jewish Committee. Thanks to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. Limor Bletter, if I could start with you. Israel has said that the bodies of 2 hostages have been found near the Al-Shifa hospital, those of a 65-year-old woman and a young Israeli soldier. We're certainly sorry to hear about that, because so far it had been hoped that the hostages would all come back home safely. Israel has also said that they have found military equipment at the hospital, and they've released footage of a tunnel shaft which they say they've discovered in the close vicinity of Al-Shifa hospital. Hamas, on the other hand, denies these claims. So do the hospital authorities, and Hamas also claims that this weaponry that Israel claims to have found at the hospital was actually planted by them. In the midst of all this, the United Nations has said that Israel should grant us access to Gaza so that we can undertake a thorough investigation into the competing claims that are being made by the two sides. There are two narratives and we need to know the truth. Do you believe that is a fair demand that's being made by the United Nations, given that in this fog of war, it's just becoming very difficult for the world at large to understand exactly what's going on in Gaza?
So first of all, I would like to thank you, first of all, in mentioning the situation of the hostages, which is, I think, one of the most serious things we need to talk about right now in terms of humanitarian situation in Gaza. As you said, there were two women, one young lady, a soldier that was, her body was found next to Shifa, and another woman who was actually also an oncologic patient that her body was found, unfortunately. So regarding what you said, I think it even goes without saying, whether anyone talks about two claims, we're talking about a claim of a country and a claim of a terrorist organization right now. I don't think anyone, I guess not anyone watching maybe can take seriously such allegations where we're talking about Israel bringing their own weapons. This is having said, I mean, just to react to what you said, we know that Al-Shifa hospital has been exploited by Hamas since 2007. During Operation Protective Edge, it was used also as their command to fire rockets from the hospital. You mentioned yourself, U.S. intelligence confirmed that Hamas is using it for terror purposes. We've seen the tunnels, we've seen the weapons. I don't think anyone disputes right now, anyone calling for something different than what they see with their own eyes probably has a different agenda and is not interested in anything about being neutral, or just is interested in going against Israel, because obviously the terror tunnels that were found beneath the hospital and the entire infrastructure that is being used by Hamas, it's not something new. It's something we all know. There is no need for any investigation, since the facts are there. There is nothing to tell. So just the fact that anyone would speak about even considering something Hamas is saying, being a terror organization that is murdering people, torturing them brutally, that is brutalizing them. And as we speak, that we still have 238 people that are being held hostage by Hamas. We're talking about babies, we're talking about children. 10 of them are under the age of 5. I don't think anyone would take seriously right now what they're saying if they have any ounce of logic in them. And the whole claims, what we're talking about, and what Israel is doing right now. Israel is doing everything it can to do a very, very precise operation in Al-Shifa hospital. They have been supplying equipment, medical equipment. They went with people that are medical staff. They went with people who speak Arabic. They were given enough time to clear the hospital. Israel brought even incubators to clear out babies. So this is the kind of this is the kind of situation. This is how Israel is trying to protect the people of Gaza. As we speak, we are the IDF is still publishing now about humanitarian corridors and telling people to evacuate, and telling them that they can even call to a landline if Hamas is interrupting them. So, as you shown before, they are using. We know the world knows. There's multiple, there's no need to discuss the evidence, especially now when we are speaking about, we are talking about a situation where we need to destroy Hamas and we need to do whatever we can to bring Israel to be safe again and to bring the hostages back. So any calls for something different currently is just like throwing someone who wants to throw a smoke screen and talk about something different. Shifa is not the only hospital that is being exploited by Hamas. We saw at Al-Akhli that there was a misfire by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. We saw that Hamas shot RPGs from 2 hospitals, El-Quds and Sheikh Hamad, and Rantisi that was being, Rantisi's children's hospital, weapons that were stored there, and they were hiding probably some of the hostages. Hamas using civilian facilities, using people as human shields is not, I think it's not under debate anymore. And if anyone thinks it is, he should probably go and check with himself why he's still saying that.
All right. In fact, talking about hostages, my Israeli guest on the show last night told me that the number of hostages has gone up by 1 because a baby was born to a hostage in Gaza just yesterday, and we pray for the safety of all the remaining hostages, including that baby. Limor, I want to ask you one more question before I move on to the rest of the panelists. There is a development that has caused alarm in Gaza. Israeli forces have dropped leaflets in 4 towns in southern Gaza, asking people to evacuate and move to clearly identified shelters, saying they should do so for their own safety. So the conclusion that is being drawn is that Israel is set to expand its ground operation from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. And the question that many are asking is that all these weeks, Palestinians were told, leave the north, go to the south for your own safety. But now, if they're not going to be safe even in the south, if there could be, aerial attacks, artillery attacks, even in the south of the Gaza, then where do Gazans go?
Well, Israel and the IDF are doing everything possible to coordinate with the humanitarian agencies in Gaza about evacuation of people. So they have probably shelters or places that they know that they can go to. Obviously, if there are people, if people are being told to evacuate anywhere, it's for their own safety. Right now, again, the whole purpose of this operation is to find the infrastructure, to find where they're shooting the missile, to find the bases of Hamas and to destroy them. So Israel will do whatever it needs and will go after Hamas, but obviously is doing everything possible in order to protect civilians. Also, in terms of bringing humanitarian aid into Gaza, so far Israel has sent over 470 tons of humanitarian aid has entered Gaza, and we are talking about food, we are talking about shelter supplies, we are talking about medical equipment. So Israel knows how to deal with the situation and do whatever it can. And obviously, if Hamas is preventing from some people to be safe, also Israel is trying to allow people also to protect them from Hamas, even when they move through these corridors or they're moving to the safer areas where they need to go. Even that Israel is doing. So we are doing whatever we can to not harm civilians. And I think over the past few days, the footage that you see around the news about what is being brought, again, like the Shifa hospital, it just shows, the pictures speaks for themselves. If there's anywhere where there isn't weapons of Hamas or terrorists hiding, so we will not go there. Unfortunately, currently this is not the situation. And there are so many targets and there are so many terrorists that are still there. And rockets are still being fired at Israel. Over 10,000 rockets that were launched over Israel since we began this war and since the attack of October 7. So Hamas still have capabilities, and Israel needs to do whatever they can in order to destroy Hamas and to bring back safety, and of course to bring back the hostages. And thank you so much for bringing up about the pregnant woman who, unfortunately, as you said, there was a woman who was kidnapped. She was 9 months pregnant. It is believed that she had a baby in captivity. None of us, as we approach now the National Day against violence against women, none of us can even start to imagine how can it be that a woman is giving birth in captivity, and the whole world needs to speak about it, and to speak now about the situation of women and children that are being brutalized, that are being abused in Gaza by Hamas terrorists. It is something super important to talk about. We have to continue to speak about it. Of course, no, we don't want any other. We are not interested in any civilian dying. The death of any person is of course something horrible. But we want to again stress out how much important it is for us that people talk about it, because so far these hostages have not been given a visit by the Red Cross. The Red Cross was not allowed to see them. Nobody checked their medical situation. This is just a dire situation that we are dealing with. We call on everyone to speak about it, especially and also we're approaching Children's Day. Please join us in calling to bring back the hostages, because this is so important. And this is an absolute. I'm sorry. They're denying their basic rights.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
There is no denying that what Hamas has done is unspeakably cruel. The Prime Minister of Israel has hinted that a deal to secure the hostages may be in the works. Let's certainly hope that works out sooner rather than later. However, Israel faces challenges on multiple fronts. One is, of course, the military front, where they're taking on Hamas. And then there is the diplomatic front, the battle of the narratives. I want to go across to Arjun Hardas to discuss that. Arjun, the war is now in its 6th week, and fact of the matter is that, at least according to the data put out by the Gazan Health Ministry, at least 11,500 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counter-offensive since the war began. More than 4,600 of them were children, and more than 3,100 were women. And these are figures that have been quoted by the United Nations as well. Do you not believe that there is intense pressure on Israel which is growing by the day from the international community, with people asking for an immediate ceasefire, the growing anger and outrage of the killing of Palestinians in Gaza? And it's not just in the Arab world. You've had US President Joe Biden saying hospitals must be protected at any cost. You had the WHO chief saying just yesterday hospitals should not be battlegrounds. This military incursion into Al-Shifa is unacceptable. You have the French President Emmanuel Macron repeatedly calling for a ceasefire. And then you have Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, almost engaging in a war of words with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after Trudeau said that the world is watching the killings of these women, children and babies, and this must stop. So the question is it going to become tougher and tougher with every passing day for Israel to justify its actions, given that, we're talking about 1,200 Israelis who were butchered on the 7th of October, which was horrendous, and now close to 12,000 Palestinians who've lost their lives?
Thank you, Neha. The thing is that, unfortunately, the figures that you were quoting are from, as you said, from the Gaza Ministry of Health. And even when you said that the United Nations is quoting similar figures, where have they got their figures from? They've got it from the Gaza Ministry of Health. There are no independent journalists in Gaza as of today. Zero. There are none. Everybody is controlled by the Hamas. They give out the figures. Where is the evidence about any of the numbers? Nobody is denying that a large number of people have died. There is no question about it, have been killed in these bombings. It's obvious that aerial attacks, etc., will cause deaths. But the numbers have to be questioned, number one, which is not a critical point, but it is important. It's being quoted globally. Secondly, the question about a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire on the 6th of October, 2023. It was broken by the Hamas. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what the retaliation would be as and when it happens. One has to consider a very basic fact. These people, Hamas is a terrorist group that obviously likes to terrorize. The idea was, and they don't care about lives at all, whether Arab, Palestinian, Israeli, none whatsoever, Jewish, anybody's lives. They want to see destruction. They invite this kind of retaliation because they are safe. Because as you know, the leadership is sitting in Qatar and other places. The people who are getting bombed are the ordinary civilians. So ceasefire, yes, it's obviously good. Even a single soldier who gets killed in Gaza, and reports keep coming out on Twitter and other social media about every day whenever there is a death from the IDF, there is obviously a notification that this person has been killed. Obviously, the parents don't want him there in Gaza and facing danger, like anybody else. But the question is, why is he there in the first place? That because he has no other choice. If there is a ceasefire, it only allows Hamas to rearm, reset itself, find themselves places to hide even further, and they will continue the massacres. Let's be very clear. And we have enough evidence which has been coming out even on social media, which is coming out where the Hamas themselves are preventing Gazan civilians from moving. Israel had to form a sort of a safe corridor flanked by tanks, Israeli tanks, for allowing Gazan civilians to move to the south. So does the Hamas here has got no credibility, zero. And the numbers definitely not. While it may be high, we just don't know what the number is. Secondly, when you say that the United Nations has had to say a lot of things, of course, where is the UN Women Organization, the one that is global for women? Women, young girls, little babies, and including that little baby, we don't even know the sex of that 1-week-old child who was born in captivity, girl or boy. No checkups. Okay, if the Red Cross cannot go in for whatever reason, the Gazans have the Red Crescent. What about them? Can't they go in? They are supposed to be equivalent of the Red Cross. Are they being allowed to go in? No. The other UN agencies that are supposed to be in coordination, they should make a demand that we want to check the health of these people first. And every other day there is so far there is no evidence of proof of life of any of the hostages of whatever age. All we see is evidence of them of their dead bodies being found once in a while. Now, this is the kind of ceasefire, if it's going to come, it's going to help nobody but the Hamas, not even the Gazan people so much. Supplies are being provided, as Limor said earlier. But the question is, where is it being done? Where is it going? If it's being monitored, yes, it's required that there's an end way that there is footage, for example, of Israeli soldiers, Arabic-speaking soldiers, carrying fuel tanks into the Al-Shifa hospital territory to hand over to the doctors. But after that, what? Where is the monitoring? How do we guarantee that this fuel and other supplies are not being used by the Hamas? They've done it earlier. We know it. All of us know about it. They've appropriated these supplies, food, water. Where is this going to end? And okay. I've been to Gaza. I'm one of those few who's been to Gaza. I was there in 2010. And believe me, the people there put out and venerate suicide bombers. On every road corner, in Gaza City I'm talking about, every road corner has a photograph, it's not a photograph, a likeness of a suicide bomber who's killed Israelis and Jews. So it's not that these people are, not all of them, again, as Limor quite rightly said, many of them, or the president also said, quite rightly, not everybody is guilty. But a whole bunch of them have got, unfortunately, stuck in this situation where they end up seeing these people as heroes.
Okay, we can all agree that not all 2.3 million Palestinians who are in that tiny enclave called Gaza are Hamas operatives or supporters or sympathizers. A lot of those people are innocent civilians who are caught in the crossfire. Of course, when you talk about how do we know whether Hamas will misuse the fuel, the trouble is that the lack of fuel is creating a situation that could end up killing a lot of innocent Palestinians. Again, it's not me. It is, it's come from international agencies like the World Health Organization and the United Nations. But let me now go across to Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, who's been listening in patiently to our other guests. Ambassador Tripathi, the question that needs to be asked is this. There is no doubt that in the aftermath of the 7th October massacre by Hamas in Israel, the world's support and sympathy largely was with Israel. However, it would be safe to say that 6 weeks into this war, the narrative has shifted, the mood of the world has changed. There is growing anger and outrage, not just in the Arab world, but even outside, and even a lot of Western countries that have come out openly in support of Israel in the aftermath of the 7th October massacre now are finding it increasingly difficult to completely justify what is happening currently in Gaza, because at least critics of Israel are terming it a genocide of the Palestinians. They are accusing Israel of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. So the question that I want to ask you is, as more and more Palestinians die in this war, how much pressure do you think Israel is likely to come under from the international community? And do you think that will make any significant difference to how they are waging this war?
Neha, your question is very pertinent. You see, Israel is coming under increasing pressure by the day. And initially, I think Israel's plan was that before the pressure mounts to become unbearable, Israel should finish its operation and then have the civilian control of Gaza given to either PA or control itself. But now that most of the Gaza is under Israeli control, except the tunnels, I think. Now, if you supply fuel and medicines and water and electricity, most of it will go to the Palestinians, innocent Palestinian civilians. Just because of the fear of some of it might be used or misused, I'll say, by Hamas, you are just stopping everything. That's not fair. That's why I don't buy this thing that since it might be misused, because now Israel is almost in a de facto control of Gaza. And in some part of tunnels, as it has been shown in visuals aired by you, that there are tunnels where the rocket launchers are there. Certainly, I don't buy Hamas allegation that Israeli defense forces have planted all this, because it is not easier to plant all these rockets and everything with hooks and everything in such a short time. But now, at least you could start communication, you could start network, and Israel is such a technologically developed country that you can say, okay, we will have limited access to internet only on the ground, above the ground, not under the underground, which will avoid giving access to Hamas fighters who are underground, who are in the tunnels. Secondly, if Israel is saying that yes, these are the arms and ammunitions which had been recovered from the Hamas hideouts, and Hamas is saying that it has been planted, then now that Israel is almost in full control of the things, why not allow United Nations inspectors or any other international neutral body to check and in order to verify the bona fides of Israel? Because then Israel will have better claim, and Israel will have a stronger argument in its favor. Thirdly, I have never, I I'm yet to see or come across any interview by any journalist, TV or print media journalist of any Palestinian who had uh, criticized Hamas. This is very unfortunate, very strange that no interview surfaced. Then again, I'll say now that backbone of Hamas is already broken, so you should stop military operation. You should take control of hospitals. I'm glad that the visuals show that Israeli defense forces are helping people in hospitals. And one more thing I must say in the end, and that is that Hamas is not an organization. Hamas is an ideology, a terrorist ideology, an output practicing a terrorist ideology. Ideology cannot be totally eradicated by the brutal force. Ideology, yes, military force can be eradicated or can be overcome by military force, but not an ideology, because Hamas there might be some underground or sleeping outfits who will surface about few years from now. So what is needed is now that the defense forces operation is almost at end. You don't have to say that till every Hamas activist is killed, we will not stop. Now it is almost at the end. So what you should do, you should rebuild the country, win confidence of local Palestinians, and try to propagate the thought that terrorism or extremism never helps. So
Yeah.
I think this is what is needed now, Neha.
That's a very comprehensive analysis, and you've made some excellent points, sir. How do you completely root out an ideology? You also disagree with the argument that fuel mustn't be provided because at the end of the day, this is needed for the survival of thousands and thousands of innocent Palestinians. You're also saying what's wrong with letting the United Nations access into Gaza. If they do corroborate the Israeli version of events, Israel will actually have a stronger footing to be on. That's very interesting. And I want to go back to Limor Bletter. Limor, I have two questions for you. Please respond to what former Indian diplomat Ambassador J.K. Tripathi just said. He is saying you have broken the back of Hamas already. So stop the bombardments and the ground invasion, the military operation in general, before the opinion of the world turns completely against you. And I want to quickly quote some figures for you and our viewers. There was recently a report carried by Reuters, the news agency, which quoted an armed conflict location and event data project survey, according to which the majority of protests that have taken place around the world since the 7th of October, of those, 86% were pro-Palestinian, while a small minority were neutral, calling for peace and a ceasefire without taking an explicit pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian stance. And the largest number of demonstrations were recorded globally after Israeli Defense Forces ordered Gazans to evacuate northern Gaza on the 13th of October. Your thoughts?
So, first of all, it's unfortunate that the numbers that you've just mentioned, but it does not mean, what it means is about sometimes public opinion that is not always true, because we know that about Israel, there are people calling for free Palestine. They're saying from the river to the sea, which basically means that from the river to the sea is just no state of Israel at all. So these are voices that are, a lot of times they are extreme, and this is unfortunate. Regarding the destruction of Gaza, obviously I'm not a military person. I'm not, from the military leaders in Israel of the IDF. But Israel Israel is doing whatever it needs right now, and we need to consider again to say this is a war we're fighting. We did not start it, and we need to do whatever we can in order to bring safety back, in order to make sure that the attack of October 7th will not happen, and those terrorists is not something at one time. They were continuing to try and infiltrate to Israel. This is something like, I don't think that right now, except if you're in the field and knowing exactly what are the targets, we can right now discuss it, and it's not my place to come and say that. But we see every day what is happening and what IDF is finding, and we see the tunnels that we thought maybe some of them were destructed, and we see them that these are elaborate tunnels that have all the facilities needed for the terrorists to hide under them, with electricity and I mean they look it's disturbingly looks good. So all right now what we're seeing is that there's more work to be done. But that's not, again, I'm not the person right now to say if we eliminated as many targets as we need. About the fuel, we saw that the UN was themselves were complaining that Hamas were stealing the fuel. We saw the reserves of fuel that Hamas have. Hamas were sitting, not long ago, they were sitting at least, they had more than 500 million liters of fuel. So if you need fuel for Gaza and you need fuel for people in Gaza, Hamas has it. And when they don't have it, they steal it. And they exploit the fuel of the hospital. They take it from we know that they took some of the humanitarian aid that went in. They were stealing it. So right now we are not, and we can see even the fuel that the Israeli soldiers were trying to bring to Shifa, and they were telling them, don't bring any, no, they didn't want to get it.
Okay.
So again, we know that if you need fuel, Hamas has it. About the internet, we still see a lot of communication coming out of Gaza. So I don't know, there's the reports about internet, but
Actually, there is a communication blackout, and the two telecom companies that operate in Gaza have stated on record that their services are completely down. I'm completely out of time. Arjun Hardas, I want to ask you this quick question. What do you make of the fact that there is growing anger against Israeli actions in Gaza around the globe, not just in the Arab world, like I said, but also in Western countries? Many are beginning to call it a genocide and crimes against humanity. Also, very quickly, the United States is Israel's closest ally, and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called on Israel to take urgent action to stop the violence by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank.
Neha, I'll just go back to history in a little while. Is that about exactly 61 years ago, during the Kennedy administration, the Americans were ready to go for a nuclear war with the Soviet Union just to get rid of rockets that were stationed, Russian rockets, Soviet rockets that were stationed in Cuba, with the range to hit the United States, the IRBM rockets. They were ready to go to war, even if it resulted in a nuclear war. So here you've got Israel, which has got Gaza right next to it. It's not even a little bit of water, 90 miles in the case of Cuba and the United States. So would if the Americans couldn't stand that kind of a danger, which would be over their heads, why is it fair to expect the Israelis to have this kind of a ever-present threat? Secondly, about your question about ceasefire, let me tell you, and I think Limor will agree with me, the ceasefire can happen tomorrow, can happen tonight. All that the Hamas has to do is surrender and release all hostages, not 5, not 10, not 15, not 20. All hostages are to be released, or at least access to the Red Cross or to any neutral organization. So release the hostages, surrender, zero firing from midnight onwards. That I can promise you.
All right.
It's a question of what the Hamas has to do, literally.
Well, the unfortunate reality is we are dealing with a terror organization, and obviously terrorists do not see reason or logic, and they certainly have no compassion for, like you said, anyone not for Israelis, not even for their own people. I think we can be very clear about that. Final word to you, Ambassador Tripathi. Sir, there is a stalemate. Hamas says hostages will not be returned till there is a complete ceasefire. Israel says we can talk about a ceasefire, release all the hostages first. The question is, what is the way ahead? More and more people are dying every day. How are we going to achieve a cessation of hostilities in this situation?
I think history tells us, Neha, that in every war, ceasefire was the first, followed by the return of the prisoners of war or captives or hostages. So it is not that first hostages are to be returned and then ceasefire will be done. I mean, it doesn't apply to reason to me. First, ceasefire happens in all wars. World War II, you take World War I, World War II, you take India-Pakistan war, you take India-China, you take any other war. First, ceasefire happens, and then happens the exchange of prisoners of war or hostages, and then negotiations for the final settlement start. So I don't agree with this that first there should be there should be a surrender of hostages, because one thing you see, Hamas being an out and out terrorist organization, initially it said that for every attack on Hamas there will be death of one hostage will be killed, but it didn't happen so, because Hamas knew that if Hamas does that, then it is going to boomerang against it, and that will be catastrophic for them. So far, few deaths had taken place, few hostages had died. Even one death is deplorable.
Yes.
But I don't think there will be much more deaths of hostages. So I think to negotiate the ceasefire will be the first thing.
That's very interesting. A very interesting perspective from Ambassador Tripathi, who says that a ceasefire can be followed by a release of the hostages. It is unlikely that it's going to be the other way around. We don't know which way this war is headed. All we know is that yes, everybody wants to see an end to this war. Even one death is one too many, whether it is of Israelis or innocent Palestinians. How are we going to achieve peace or normalcy is $1 million question that nobody seems to have an answer to at this moment. But on that note, Limor Bletter, Arjun Hardas, Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, thanks to all three of you for your time and perspective on this story. All right, as we wrap up Global Lens tonight, we have a very special story for you. The Cricket World Cup final is now just 2 days away, and 1.3 billion Indians are waiting with bated breath to see the men in blue lift the World Cup this Sunday. If they do, it will be India's third World Cup win ever, and a truly historic one. Guess who else is rooting for the Indian cricket team? The US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, who tweeted, "Rooting for Team India for the World Cup final on Sunday. Men in blue, you're on fire. Let's bring that trophy home once more." Ambassador Garcetti recently also met with some of the legends of the 1983 World Cup winning Indian team. And here is what happened. All right, so there is some stress, but a lot of excitement. That World Cup final is just 2 days away, and we simply cannot wait to see the men in blue lift that coveted trophy for the third time. Here's hoping the men in blue can do it for us. Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend ahead, and here's wishing the Indian cricket team all the very best.